Hoi there! I'll try to give you advice on how to avoid using external programs outside of Blender, but Krita is free and I highly recommend you download it, or buy it on Steam for dirt cheap. Trust me, it's really nice and convenient to have. And so is Cat's Blender plugin, so if you don't have that yet, you're in big trouble. How to texture paint your model in Blender. If you find yourself sweating at the thought of texture painting your model, firstly, Rain Sensei is here. Okay, you'll be fine. Anyone can do this. It's the modern times and we all have access to the internet. If you really want to, you can just grab a PNG of skin or jeans texture off Google and slap it on your model, call it a day. But first, let's quickly go over some basic colouring techniques, assuming there's no fancy lighting at this point. If we just take a basic coloured sphere and light it in the most basic manner, the highlights tend to be warmer and the shadows cooler, typically yellower and bluer. As you can see how I subtly change my colours based on the colour wheel, I'm going towards yellow but also picking a more saturated and lighter colour, or going towards blue and picking a darker and less saturated colour for the shadows. I could go into detail about why that's the case, but let's skip that for today. Left and right is for saturation, up and down is for darkness and lightness, and towards yellow or towards blue is self-explanatory. If you want to make colour picking simpler, take advantage of the effects and blending modes. Here I use multiply, overlay and opacity with plain yellow and a purpley blue colour for shading. If you want to make things even simpler, just pick an existing palette with the eyedropper tool. Commission someone to give you a coloured character sheet, or use my reference sheet, or if you don't have the money to harass people to help you out, then get AI to make a colour palette for you. It doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to make sense. When we're lighting the model, we want to pay attention to occlusion shadows. This is where light ends up getting severely blocked because of the angles or area it's pointing towards. This will be what we shade the darkest on a model. As of right now, my 3D colouring style encourages a dark to light gradient from these areas, unlike what I used to do by shading the entire underside of something like an arm and then blending it out, which personally I don't think looks as good. Raised faces or areas facing upwards also get attention, but in regards to highlights, blushing on the skin is also nice to have, and I'm sure you'll appreciate my new knowledge about how to use a layering approach to give you extra room for mistakes. Immediately going into Blender, you'll notice the lack of texture painting tools, but here's how you can take advantage of what you've got. So you'll be happy to know this is the default cube, or maybe I secretly deleted it when you weren't looking. You'll never know. Here, I just want to start by bringing this to a point where you can see it a bit better. So I'm just going to do that. Just going to bring it up to a point here. And I want to add a material to it. Oh, and gladly it already has one. So I'm just going to name this brush test. You don't have to follow along with this. I just want to show you I want to show you what Blender can do, basically. Let's go to shading and let's grab this, delete it, we don't want it. We're going to go into our file explorer and grab a texture that we made earlier. You won't have this, but I'll include it for patrons, since it's not really necessary. Okay, So we have this shape. Let's quickly go into edit mode. Let's select this face up here at the top and this face at the bottom. Control E, mark, seam. And we want one at the back. So here, we'll just do this. Control E, mark, seam. Okay. Go into UV editing, A, U, unwrap. So this square I want at the top, that at the top. This square I want at the bottom. The rest is not the right orientation. I want this to be horizontal and this is vertical. So let's rotate 90 degrees. See how that looks. Will have to be on this view, material preview. And you'll see if we compare it. The yellow's on top, pink's on bottom, so it's on the right way. Let's grab, scale, and SY to cover this page. GY. Okay, so it's not too important to get the names perfect. I just need enough so it will show properly. GX. And here too. GX. I think that'll do just fine. Okay, now the top square. This doesn't matter too much. This is just for aesthetic reasons. Okay. Now let's see how the brushes act. Just hit A. We will put this in this view too. Before we do that, can you see these colors are kind of grey? And if we go to UV editing, let's deselect, and we look at these, they're way brighter. Okay, let's just go to this render properties, the camera button, go down to color management, and we'll change from filmic to standard. This is view transformation? View transform. Now when we go here, it should be pretty much one-to-one, just like the reference. Unfortunately, it doesn't do that by default. I'm not sure why, but it's definitely nice to have a more saturated image you can look at. Let's go to texture paint. We have some titles here. We have Krita. I'll show you that last. Soft brush. I'll show you that almost last. Smudge and blur. So we'll start with the blur brush, which is soften. It's called soften, technically. If we zoom in, oh, we need to go in the right mode. I'm not 100% sure which side this is, but let's zoom in using the blur brush and just, this is what default comes with. This is what it looks like. No matter how much I go up and down, it just stays in a really localized area. Let's see where that is. Oh, here it is. It's on this side. As of currently, there's nothing I can do to make this blur more. If I just keep clicking, maybe it'll go further, but it's a bit too much effort for a little bit of blur. What we can do is we can click this number here and it will copy the brush. We can rename it, let's just say blur 2. I think we can also click here to see what we've got. So we have blur 2 and we have soften. So now we're on blur 2. Let's say the strength is not affected by pressure. Let's mess with the fall off. These are all different types of fall off. So let's try this one. I'm sure it's the first one that we did. I'm not very impressed with this blur brush. Let's see what box blur does, which is way greater actually. You can see all of these. Box blur is the greatest one. So if you're going to use the blur brush, I highly recommend use box blur. As nice as it is, I'm still not too impressed by it. Okay, now smudge. This brush here. Smear. Smudge or smear. This is the default settings. This is what it looks like. And you can see it's not mixing the colors at all, it's just pushing them around. So I would really only use this to push things around. This one is a lot more obvious with the different full off methods. It just acts slightly different. But yeah, definitely not my favorite tool. Now, something that I do appreciate from Blender is its soft brush. Let me double check. There should be a color palette around here. There we go. Okay, so for the color palette, usually name it something. Let's just call it colors. And if you S and click, it'll show up in the palette. So if we just S and click all of these, S, click, you can just hold it. You don't need to lift up your mouse. But also, if you just S and let go, it doesn't jump to the palette, it just goes straight to your brush, which is great. I didn't know that before. You can use fall off and brushes to get a more soft effect. So this is space stroke. If we just use my mouse, for example, it'll look like this. So what I recommend you do, if you do want to blend stuff together, is to color pick from both sides. With S. Make sure your brush has strengths on, or just turn the strengths down if you're using a mouse. Grab a color with S without clicking, grab a color and start painting lighter. Now why is it not... Okay, had a bit of an oopsie. Don't check illuminate. Don't do that. S without clicking, going over these spots, getting the pink, going over, getting the yellow, just going back and forth until it starts blending somewhat. And then you could do something even better and go back to your blur 2 brush and just blur that out. Just keep going back and forth with the soft brush and the blur brush. You'll probably find something in between. Even though this blending is fine, and you could really go at it for a while and produce something pretty nice with the soft brush and soften blur brush, and I don't know about smear. One of the favoritist things that I like doing is just importing the whole texture to Krita. So if we just image and save, then wherever you save that file, you take the file, open it in Krita. You open it in Krita and look how quick and stress-free this is. You can duplicate the file layer if you want and just paint over top of it. Just get this brush that I love. It's called Blender Blur. Quick and painless blending. And it goes so far. You can just keep going over the top of it No issues whatsoever. And it actually mixes the colours together instead of just pushing them around. It finds a middle between colour A and B. Not only that, but you can use a soft brush that's way easy to set up because it's just one click. Grab that, grab your soft brush, spray over. Easy blending, the easiest. And there's tons of other blurring brushes you can play with. It's not any it's actually for essential. It's not any brush that you can use or anything like that. It's the base ones. And this is pretty handy. Very nice way to take a lot of results with them. So after all the messing around in another program, you can just save. Very simply, hit the save button, hit OK, and we go straight back to Blender. And we press this neat little button here, image, and reload. Now we get all of these sides. Just remember to click the right thing, otherwise you might find yourself getting frustrated. Also just conveniently taught you how to texture. So technically you don't need me to teach you how to do anything else because I've told you everything I know. I'll show you how I start off with tutorial-chan, but after that, you're on your own. I'm just going to time-lapse the rest of it. Now, when it comes to people, texture painting isn't so straightforward. So we can go to Material Preview. Let's hide the armature for a moment. Click on the body. Let's see. We're going to have to be a bit more thoughtful about where we're putting what where. So I usually have a body, head, hair, and clothes. So let's do that, I guess. We'll start with this. We'll do body. Let's call it T-chan body. And head. We'll add a new material just using the plus button, double clicking. Oops, no, not double clicking. Adding new first and then double clicking to rename T-chan head. And then add new T-chan hair. Now for bodies, I've been doing 3080 pixels for my commission models, but they're quite larger and I really like having high quality materials to give to my clients. So I'd personally recommend that you don't need to go over 380. You could easily get by with 2000. 180 is alright, but the higher you go, the more details you can fit in the image, for example. For the sake of this video, we'll do 3080. We'll do 3080, but you definitely don't need to go that high. So if we just go to texture paint, add new up here. You can change it. You can leave it at 1024 if you want. I'm gonna just do 3080 because you can always make it smaller. And the color will be white for now. We're gonna call it T-chan body. Okay. And here we have it here. We click image and save as. Make sure you save it in an appropriate folder near your Blender files. I'm actually going to name it T-chan body text, T-E-X, for texture, and save it as. Okay, so now it's in the file. Now it's in the folder. Remember, image, save as to put it in the right folder. Now we still need to add the image to here. So the easiest way to do that is by deleting the shader, going into your files where you save the image, and just drag and dropping it in right here, And you can just feed that directly into here. Okay, so it's white body at the moment. We'll go to render properties, color management, change it to standard so we can see better, and save. Now let's get the color correct. I like to do this in Krita. Right, this is the image we just made in Blender. And we want to drag and drop in here our reference image. So you'll have this version, but I actually am going to import a transparent version that I have. So I'm going to actually insert as reference image. So I'm just dragging and dropping and clicking insert as reference image. I'm going to put this near to the edge. I want to grab a really medium neutral color, which will be this, and I want to grab my bucket fill tool and fill this in with that color. Next I want to make a little color palette, and I like using this pixel brush. Press B for brush. Scaling this down to 0, bringing it back up to about 6. I'm just starting to make a color palette. Just start with some of the darker colors. This might be nice to have. So put that here. This dark orangey red. Here, the medium color, this pinky color too. And this pinky color. And then we can go back to Blender. We can go to texture paint. Then we can hit image and reload. Now we have the color of the skin that is not looking correct. So let's try to put that right. Color management, standard, there we go. Now you just keep going with that until you've finished everything that you have. The head, actually I'm going to have a different size file because the head's smaller, so it makes sense to have a smaller file. For the head I usually have 2050. Remember, these are for commissions, these are for big complicated models that people are going to be using to stream with, so I go bigger. I'm just going to make it in Krita this time instead of making it in Blender. Oh, and save as PNG as well. Blender and Unity likes PNGs. We'll call this T-Chan head text. We can also save as, file save as, and call this T-Chan hair text. Because the hair, I also don't use a big file for it. And because it's hair, it'll be a different color. So we have the head, we'll go to shading, delete this. This, we'll click this button here, browse material to be linked. Hair, same with this. Anything else that's sticking out? You don't need to make a new material if you've already got one. Let's click the head because we want to separate the hair parts from it. So go to edit mode and we'll see that this starts all the way back here. There's a line across here that needs to be separated, so we'll add a seam. Control E, mark seam. See, it'll go red. Here, here. Probably there, here. Control E, mark seam. Okay, so we should just be able to, let's do face select L, and this should be able to select separately. So we'll just add, don't click new, click hair, and then hit assign. So these will go green now. So starting with the head, just because there's a lot of details on there. We can hide some of these. Let's focus on the head alone. If we look at the reference image, should be this one here. There's no asymmetry. There's no asymmetry. That being said, it might be nice to have some level of asymmetry around this area regarding the freckles. So, when we come to unwrapping it, we're going to unwrap the face twice. So let's start with these first. We don't have to mark any seams on that because it's just a circle. Let's see. We do have a mirror on and we do have an armature on, but not a subdivision. So we can just unwrap. Set an angle, so we'll try again. Project from view. There we go. I do like this to be symmetrical, so we'll just let's take off this brush. Let's take off proportional editing. S, Y, 0. S, X, 0. We can select these. We can Alt P. We can open this little menu here and uncheck clear. Now I'll put these red dots on your mesh, which will hold it in place when you unwrap. So if we do unwrap again, unwrap, it kind of smooths the shape without you having to put extra effort in. By keeping this in place, we don't need to worry about it being on a tilt or anything, so that's great. Eyes usually get a lot of attention as far as avatars go, so give it a good bit of space. Because your eyes are not asymmetrical, we don't need to unwrap it twice. But if they were asymmetrical, you would unwrap it twice, as in one for each side. Let's address this. Quite a nice thing we have about this reference is there's a nice gradient here. There's not too much detail on the eyelashes, so actually, instead of putting in the effort to unwrap all of these little triangles, we can just go straight to UV editing, this menu here, and project from view. We have this kind of shape. We do want to separate this a bit more, so we'll just put this off the screen for a moment. Right, let's go back to the rest of the face. Go to edit mode. We want to be able to separate the ear, so we'll do that. Okay, so really you just want to separate the under chin from the rest of the face. There are ways to unwrap it, so you just don't have to worry about the UV stretching too much, but this will be fine. Go back to UV editing, make sure we have face select on, and we want to go to, over here, material properties, click on the head and hit select. Let's go into the material mode so we can see what we're doing. This one here. We want to hit U and unwrap. Okay, it looks like we didn't do the mouth properly. Let's try that again. Control E, mark seam. Face select. L, U, unwrap. Okay, there we go. You can also just click the hair and deselect. U, unwrap. So this will be the eye. This will be the back of the ear. This will be the front of the ear. And let me double check. Great, no subdiv. I'll put that there for now. I'm going to do this eye unwrap again, so I'm just going to hit L, numpad 1, U, project from view. You'll see these outer circles. I'm just going to start hiding them. one by one. So we reach here, L, Alt P, and uncheck clear. Going to hit this again, L, U, unwrap. That should stretch out from that point. I am going to scale these a bit because they are really exaggerated, and probably hide these parts. H, we can do the relax brush and smooth these out a little bit. It's nicer to not have it so strong. So let's put the strength down. Just with a click you can smooth these out a little bit. I'm only doing it on this outer edge because it's not going to be seen as much from the main angles. If we just Alt H to unhide, go back to the selection. I'm going to change it to lasso actually. L, you can grab this and scale this down. Because the whites of the eyes aren't symmetrical, we're not going to unwrap that twice. Let's select the pupils, so shift, pupils, head, okay, control, head, control, eyelashes. So go back to UV editing, we have this whole mess. And hit A, hide the hair, but it's not in the right order. Let's just manually hide the hair. L, H should do it. So for everything else now. Now I've got them all in a general area, we can come back to here, make sure all the origins are at 0. What we do is Control A, apply scale. Do you know what? Control A, apply all transformations. Why not? On these two, Control A, all transformations. On these, Control A, all transformations. I'm just right click selecting, Control A, all transformations. Control clicking on these. UV editing. Got them all selected. UV, average island scale. Okay, there we go. Now this kind of scales them roughly to about how they are in the scene. I'm also going to scale this down a bit because I don't want it to be that big, regardless of how big it might be in the scene. It would also be nice to do an island. Here we do. Pack islands margin, we'll do 21. Ooh, and no rotate, uncheck rotate. Let's go back to 20. Okay, so we'll go back here, whereas the teeth, we're going to divide them in half. Because there's no real pressure to have this mirrored. X, delete faces, turn the mirror modifier on, and turn clipping on. Let's bring this up. We want to put the downward facing ones together and the upward facing ones together. We're going to apply the mirror on the head. So here, apply, go back to UV editing, only select this part of the face this time, U and unwrap. Now we can have symmetry on the freckles, R minus 90. The only problem is we still need to fit it in on the page. Control click on mouth stuff, oopsie daisy. Control click, UV editing, A to select all. Because the head is mirrored now, if we hit L on this and hit G, you'll see that both sides don't move with each other anymore. So you just need to be aware of that when you're selecting things. The lasso will usually just solve it. Color palette, add new, and we'll just call this T-Chan body. I'm gonna start holding S down and clicking with your left click to get all of these colors that we have pre-selected. These will be the eyelashes, the eyes. Let's do this paint mask, and let's also do fade inactive geometry. So you'll see a bit easier what you're selecting. Because we have the eyelashes, we'll do fill and click. And we didn't have the right color selected, so make sure the color is selected. You might need to click it twice. Let's see, everything is exactly on the line, which is what we don't want. So let's do some more stuff. We'll go to options, bleed, we'll put it to 10. Hopefully that's enough. So if we paint, it should go over the line now, except for this point here. It's okay, we'll just use the brush and we'll use this fall off, this square fall off. Take the brush down with your square brackets. You can just fill this extra part in. And there's a few more extra parts that didn't get coloured properly. Okay, that's one. Now I do want to show some transparency, so I'm actually just gonna hit L on that alone. Texture paint, go to the fill brush. We're going to hit erase alpha. Now because we have this mask on, this paint mask on, I should be able to just click on this and it will only affect this area here, which is great, which is exactly what we want. Remember to image and save. You might have to save as, depending on how your project is set up, but definitely save. Now we do need to do the eyebrow, so let's click on the head. UV editing. So far nothing's touching, which is great. Let's only select the eyebrows for now. Texture paint, got this brush. Here's the eyebrow. We don't want it on erase, we want it on mix. We can do that. And we didn't have the mask on, so make sure the paint mask is on. Do that, and not touching still, which is great. And so far nothing's touching, which is great. There are some minor issues though. Here. This is how we'll fix them. We'll use this here, a snap, and we'll do vertex. Turn this off. Grab that. Snap it to there. Grab these. Okay, we can't do two at a time, unfortunately. I'm sure this is just a product of moving stuff around. Do actually want this color, which looks very similar to this but slightly darker, but we can just do that on it for now. We'll go to UV editing. Going to do something slightly different. I'm going to select this edge with Alt and then Shift Alt, select that edge, so now both are selected. Let's select those both and let's turn off snap. We want this to be set to individual oranges individual origins, and we'll scale these down. Hit A. Yeah, that should be more than enough space. Oopsie daisy. L. Just want to scale it so it doesn't bleed too much. It's probably about fine. Let's Control I to select the inverse and hide. And we'll go to texture paint and we should be able to just fill these in. Let's do that. We still have more to go. Immediately from this layer alone, I would just go into blushing everything. And no shadows, just some blushing. But I'd still need to unwrap the body for that, so might as well do that too. Teach you another thing about UV unwrapping. Right, so when you have shapes like these, very complicated shapes, you don't want them to be squished too much. So let's see, if we take this outward, go to overlays and display stretch. Okay, you'll see the fingers are a little warped. This midsection is a little light, so we'll start slightly modifying it. Just until this area and this area are somewhat the same color. Before I get too into this, because the face is going to be symmetrical too, we're going to go down to symmetry and turn it on. So now when I paint on one side, it'll copy to the other side. The only point I'll turn that off is for the freckles, like I said earlier. Here's another trick that I learned recently about painting. Oh my god. Okay, so your fall off menu here, it says normal fall off. This angle is usually 80. Change it to 90 for some reason. Change it to 90 and uncheck occlude and uncheck back face culling. Wait, let me see if it works with back face. Okay, no it doesn't. Uncheck occlude and uncheck back face. Now, because I want to blush the ear, well, I want it to go straight through. Now it goes straight through. If you don't do that, let's say you have all of these selected and this is at 80, like it is at default. By the way, I made a new brush for this. I called it soft brush. So if we do this and you look around, you'll see there's a harsh line there, which we don't want at this point in time. So, angle, 90, occlude, uncheck, back face, uncheck. So now we just blush the ear like that. And it's perfect. Couldn't be better. Thank you very much. the important part of this lesson, and then everything else is going to be time-lapsed, is making a new layer. This is how I'm going to start it. We go to our textures and make sure everything's saved. Yes, again, because paranoia saves you from a lot of hassle. Make sure the Blender file is saved, and then we do this. We go into Krita. You don't have to go into Krita, but this is how I'm going to do it. We go to the body, and then we uncheck this, and now we have a very blank transparent PNG. We're going to File, Save As, and we save as shadows, but we just add it on to the end of whatever the file is called. So this is T-Chan body text, and then I'm gonna hit shadows. Make sure your caps lock isn't on, and then hit save. Okay, then we do it again. File, save as, T-Chan body text, then instead of shadows, you get rid of that and name highlights. We also do that with the head and the hair. Now, you can just make another file in Blender the way I showed you before. So going into UV editing or texture paint, image, new, and then save as. But we're not going to do that just because my workflow in Krita is a lot faster. We'll start with the head. Okay, so we have the head. We want to go into our files where we just saved the shadows and such, and we'll find the one named correctly. So there should be T-Chan head text shadows. So we put that in there. And then we should have another one. T-Chan head text highlights. So put that in there. Now, we need to add a lot more nodes now. So let's first add a math node, so we can take advantage of transparency. I'm just gonna put this through here, I believe. And we're also going to add a mix node. Mix RGB. Shift and D. Now this can go, oopsie daisy. This goes first through, that one goes to the top color, this one goes to the second color, this one goes to that. Then we extend from here, this one goes to the top, this one goes to the second, this one goes to that. Now I might use another math node for the highlights, but for now we'll leave it be. And then you can feed this directly into here. But because we do have some transparency going on, we're going to make this even more complicated. So let's add mix shader. That goes into here. Now we need shaders to put into the mix shader. Now we'll get an emission shader, emission, and we need a transparency shader too. Transparent. Now, I'm pretty sure it works like this. The emission goes to the top, the transparent goes to the bottom. The alpha for the first image, it has to be the first one, goes into the top. Now the color for the last mix shader, mix RGB, has to go to the emission. If we move this across, it goes like that. And I think I did it wrong. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the opposite of what I said. the color goes into the emission and the transparent goes into the top. We set the blend mode to alpha clip, and you'll see it disappears. My shadow mode will put it to clip too. You can also do blend or hashed, but the blend you have to set up a bit more carefully, like unchecking backface and making sure certain things are in certain orders. But we're not going to use blend because we're not doing anything too complicated, so clip will do for now. Now we can also just copy this setup over. You can just copy this, control copy, and we can put it on the body too. So let's move this across. Control V, put that in there. And we get the shadows and highlights for the body. Now what you can do from this point onwards, you can go to layout, save, go to texture paint, and make sure you're on the right layer. So over here, you can either click the right layer from here, or you can just open the right PNG from here. But I know this is the right one. We can go to purple if you want, like grab a purpley blue, make it dark enough. Even desaturate it if you need to. Desaturation is towards the center on this color wheel. You can start shading like that, but let's not use that brush. Let's use the original brush that we got rid of. You can start adding shadows with this if you really want to. And it'll show up like this dark purple in here, but it'll be multiply on here. So it won't give you the darkest. You can color the whole model like this, and then on the highlights layer, you can maybe do a light color like this. Oh wait, you can't see it on that. Like this. And then blur it out however you decide to. Alright, to put it simply, blender blur box mode, box blur, not gas and blur. It's a lot more effective than I thought. Just you need to be really careful about crashing the program because I think it takes a lot of energy to blur stuff out. To put it simply, I think from the knowledge that I've given you about texture painting, I think you can at least get to the next stage where you have shadows, highlights, and the base color that you can move on from then onwards. I'm actually just gonna go live and stream the rest of this coloring process. It'll be time-lapsed here, so enjoy the Twitch notifications. Alright, before I run off, I think I will show you some things that you will find useful. Let's quickly have a look at this model that I've finished shading already. If we go into texture paint, these are all already merged into one file, but let's see. Right, let's see you do this kind of thing. On the hand, there's a harsh edge now, because you've been coloring. You can just go in with your blur tool, make sure it's on box mode here in the advanced settings. You can just smooth that harsh edge out very easily. Because I don't want that, I'm going to reload the image. Here's another thing, you have your brush, you're painting with it, like so, but you're not very good at controlling your mouse, so let's reload, stabilize, and now look, you have a little trail that gets rid of any jitteriness that you would have usually had with your hand control. Because you will have your highlights and shadows on different layers, you can just correct them individually and soften them individually, so you don't have to worry about messing up the layers underneath. Also, you'll definitely need to go in between these fingers and use your soften to get rid of any harsh seam lines. Seam lines, you typically want to keep them away from the camera because they do show up in certain situations. Bleed does help. Currently it's at 15, but the bigger the better, sort of. This is just not necessary. It's just for filming purposes. We're going to take her straight into Vrchat after we do a couple of things. All I'm doing is selecting some of the mesh, duplicating it, and then separating by selection. So anything else? Not really. Everyone's model is going to be different, painted different. Depending on your reference, you might feel the need to do things a certain way. Here's the thing I like doing. Go into UV editing. You'll see that some of these lines are super straight. So let me try to select one that's not already. There we go. If we select this and then just Unwrap, you'll see it's not straight up and down. But what you can do is select this edge, SX0, and start manually straightening it, SX0, SX0, and then for this side as well, SY0, SY0. There's something we can do in Blender by selecting a square face, and then U, and follow active chords. Okay, and then it will straighten by itself. Another way we can do this, if we just hit Unwrap on this side, I have an add-on actually that you have to pay to use. It's called UV Squares. It basically just does that in one click. So I use it for certain parts of the hair. Let's revert. UV editing. Okay. I use it for certain parts of the hair. You'll see that certain shapes I want to keep some of it straight and other parts curved. So it just depends. These are straight, these parts are not, as you can tell. But mainly you just want to try to avoid things overlapping. Like here, for example, they're overlapping, so I can just cut it off and put it over here somewhere instead. The hair is also in layers. You have the base layer, the shadows. We actually have a second base layer. That's just because of my colouring style. Yours might be different. Also have the highlights layer here. Because of how I like to colour things, it's nice to be able to make a shape and then erase in a blur fashion. Because we have this soft brush that we made, well, I made, you might have not made it. We can use this. We can use the occlude and backface culling trick, so you can do some gradients. Gradients are nice. They bring things to life. And the fringe is also using transparency. At this point, I did change the blend mode to blur. Is it? Oh no, it's just blend. Change the blend mode to blend and alpha clip. And of course, backface is not on, otherwise that would happen. You'll be able to see this in the time lapse, but I'm gonna put the time lapse in another video. This one's already an hour long. Right, so what you do, you open any software that uses textures, and you start layering them up. So you have this, you have the shadow layer, which would be here, the highlights layer, I think. Yeah, and I actually have an extra layer. It's called an outlines layer, and that's where I just put some extra details for some of the eye shines, some outline for the iris. If you make this very round and then leave the edge blocky, it kind of hints that the eye is rounder than it actually is. And I like the look of it and how it saves topology. So in the end we have this. And if I show this by itself, you'll see that I coloured it one colour and then I went in and let's put this mask on. Could just go in and colour these parts individually. So whatever software you have that allows you to do that, do that. Krita is free again. If you don't have it, good luck. I think you should be able to bake your textures or something. I've not done it before, but you'll probably be able to. Baking is pretty much just going into the shading tab. Let's pretend we don't have this set up this way. Let's put this through here. Let's grab a UV map node. UV map. Put that there. We're going to grab a texture the same size as the body texture, which should be something like 3050, something like that. Oh, 3080. 3080 is what I'm using. You might be using something slightly different. So let's just put this through here. I think we select these. Change the render engine to cycles, and I believe we go down here and bake. Texture bake, 0%. Let's see how this works. Wow, 1%, oh boy. It would have been way better to do this in Krita. Okay, let's see how this went. Wow, okay. So we have this over here now. And we should be able to image. Let's do save as just to be safe, and then save it as the new image. So if we now just put this image into emission, this would be the new image. So remember, the old one is coming from this. So we'll just uncheck that. We already have an alpha that works just fine. So we can just feed the new image that we made, which should be this one here. Feed it straight into the color to this color on the emission. And it'll look pretty much just fine. I'm not so sure about these edges. I'm sure we can adjust the bleed on the bake. Let me see. This is fine, but you know, use Krita. You'll figure it out. You can Google how to bake images. I just showed you how to do it on the basic level. I never do this, pretty much. I just want you to know there is an option to do it in Blender if you're really stubborn about not downloading Krita. Yeah, that's the only problem with it. It even has an edge. It's just not the edge that I want. So yeah, we'll be doing emotes next before we put it into Vrchat to test it. Rightio then. This series is brought to you by my Patreons, with special thanks to my Grey Clouds and Grey Skies, Eeyore Hee-Haw, Silent K, Soat, and Spud the Cat. See you in the next class. Farewell.